All right, Giovanni.
Yes.
Giovanni, where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I am from Brooklyn, New York originally.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And tell me about your family growing up. You had mom and dad.
Yes, my mom and dad, they were both from Argentina. My mom is from Mendoza and my father's from Cordoba. And they came into this country about in the late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. And have a brother as well. And it was just the four of us here.
When we were talking on camera, you see yourself as very Argentinian.
Yes, yes, definitely celebrating the big win a couple of weeks ago. So yes, I'm very much Argentinian, but I've been Americanized as
Yeah.
well.
And tell me how you grew up in high school. What kind of kid were you?
I was a good student. I was a learner. I like to learn. I mean, thankfully that has not changed. Again, first generation, so there was a lot of pressure on me to succeed in America. Which hopefully I've made my parents proud, and I believe I have. So, but I was a fun kid. I loved sports growing up. Played a lot of baseball, a lot of basketball, some soccer, not as much as my father would have liked, and I also boxed some as well.
And you found yourself in a career. How long have you been? What do you call this? A gigolo?
No, not a gigolo because there's no real sex as the normal meaning is, or the general meaning is. It's more of a pro-dom, more of a domination and exploring those avenues of kink.
How did you find yourself doing that kind of?
Well, very curiously, I was seeing a friend, and she started doing sex work. And so we were still seeing each other while she was doing sex work, and I've always been a pretty dominant personality in and out of the bedroom. And so we got into that a little bit just on our own. And she started making really good money being a sex worker. She kind of got into the Asian kink. She was Taiwanese. And then I lost my job. And then she was like, you know what? You should probably be doing this for money because you're really good at it. And then I said, okay, well, and then she set me up on the website that I believe you found me on. And then all of a sudden, found a couple of clients, seemed to enjoy it. The money was not bad, but I didn't really do it for the money at first, and maybe not even now. I just like the whole kinky sexual aspect of it.
What is the typical? I don't even know how to. Like, is it a married woman that is?
Oh, like the
hiring
typical
you?
client type
Yeah.
of. No, I mean, there had been some married women, and I've had sessions where the woman brings her husband to watch, perhaps. Not really cuckolding because I'm not into humiliation or degradation, even though I was asked to do that. But yeah, typical is a woman in their 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s, type A's, very powerful women. They usually are some type of attorney or executive types where, I've learned that those type of women, they have a hard time not being in, what people consider control. So they would come to me, or they would find me through word of mouth or on that website, and they would, we would have a conversation as far as, what they wanted, and I would tailor make a experience for them, per se.
Which is some form of domination, but
yes,
not,
yes.
not your typical.
Well,
types.
I mean, there was a lot of usually there's restraints, and again, it goes less about restraining someone to make them feel less than, and more these are just tools to help them give up that control that they have such a hard time releasing. So it's and then some women, again, you have to have a very clear conversation before. And what I've learned is that some women like to have that conversation because, you set boundaries and limits and likes and, more importantly, dislikes, right? So once you set those parameters, you advance, and then you go into the session, and then, you can go a little avant-garde during the session as well. But yeah, so then there's, and it's, again, during that discussion, you find out whether they want to explore pain or pleasure or both. And then you use kind of one to incite the other. And then, Usually it's a good time for me because I get to exercise my dominance in a very controlled, almost intellectual manner, right? And they get what they want. And then of course the monetary compensation isn't terrible.
What do you typically charge for an evening of?
Well, I with my friend as a sex worker, she was always like, charge a lot, and you'll get into that upper echelon of people. And then, I don't know, I just always found that, I never lowballed myself. So a typical session would be like 400 an hour, about. And then, if they wanted to, have more than an hour, I always started at an hour just so, we can get into it. And usually it would expand into 2 or 3 hours, and then, I would multiply it a little bit more, but it's usually start at about 400 an hour.
And sex eventually will ensue?
At the very beginning, I did get sexual with the clients, and then I found out that, I just didn't want to mix the two realms. It just got a little confusing in my brain. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to start looking at this as a job, right, as like a profession. Even though it wasn't my main profession, but just because it did get a little messy. All of a sudden I was having sex with my partners, and I was thinking, man, I can probably be charging for this. And then all of a sudden I was like, I don't want that in my mind while I'm trying to enjoy myself, personally. So then I made that separation very early on. So, the clients would orgasm, and there would be penetration with toys and, my fingers, and there would be a lot of teasing of sex happening, but no real sex was happening. Even though I was offered a lot of money to make it happen. But I just knew that was just, you have to have a line. You have to have a line within yourself to, or not, but I decided to.
Yeah. How many years have you done this?
I've done it for about 7 years now. Yeah. It came in handy during the pandemic when I did not have an employment and no one could touch anyone. So then that's when I was able to elevate my per hour, just because it was a little bit, more exclusive. Yes.
And you work mostly in New York City, or?
Yes, just exclusively in New York City, and like, why not? Even though I have been asked to like leave the state, and I was just like, you know what, I'm okay. I like New York City, so I'll stay here.
And typically it's a younger woman or older woman, or?
Yeah, usually, I'm 48 now. So yeah, it was usually women in their 30s, mid 30s. I rarely met anyone younger than their mid 30s. Yeah.
How does it affect you emotionally to be doing this?
Again, once I drew that line and that boundary within myself, to not make it a sexual, situation with my clients, I was able to be completely fine emotionally.
For a guy, it's easier probably.
Yes, and then also like, as long as the client was happy, right? Because at the end of the day, I am providing a service, right? And they are paying for it. So, I would make sure that I would work extra hard to make sure that I achieved everything that we had discussed within the parameters before the session. So, yeah, so emotionally I was fine once I drew that line. But when I was having sex with them, even though it didn't last too long, that portion of it, I was like not the happiest after. It was like a little emotionally like, I don't know if I even should be doing this, but I enjoy doing it. And then I'm like, oh, why don't I just not have sex with the clients?
It's surprising that still works.
Yes, yeah. Because again, I'm naturally dominant. I've always been like, the alpha in the room, but like a quiet alpha, not an aggressive one. So it kind of like, it checked that box. And then thankfully, I've never been much, I haven't been ever desperate for sex. So this wasn't like my only way to like be with women, so I kind of like was able, look, I can have this, and then I can have this in my personal life as well.
But what have you learned about women from doing this?
Wow, I've learned a lot. I definitely am, I don't know if you want to call it a feminist, but I am just a champion for women. I've learned that they have a tough time being who they really want to be, right? In the patriarchal society that we live in, a lot of suppression. I mean, I saw it with my father and my mother. Again, coming from Argentina, a little bit of old school there. And that's always kind of like the excuse, right? Oh, it's old school, so it's okay. No, it wasn't okay then, and it's not okay now. So that's what I learned, and I think that women want to tap into that. They want to tap into that, being submissive and giving up control without losing what they have gained, right? So then, they go and they pay for a service, which thankfully, is good for me. But I have learned that women do enjoy being submissive, but they don't want to risk losing everything that they've gained, either personally or like for the gender. So I've learned that. A couple of the things I've learned, that women have every right to be more sexual than men, because the way I see it is, if women stop being sexual, all of a sudden that's the end of the species. Right? Like, no more species if women don't want to have sex, right? So
the men will go haywire.
Yes. And I mean, if they shut down the factory, it's over as a species. And so I've learned that women inherently are more sexual than men, but because of the suppression and because of, just being stepped on for so long, for centuries, that they can't release it up until recently. Now younger women are just way more free and way more aggressive sexually even. There's no shame built into their sexuality, right? So I learned that as well, that younger women are just more freer because they don't have like those shackles of society, even though they are still there, it's just less ingrained, right? Like their parents maybe gave them a little bit more flexibility, but women in the 30, 40, 50 range, they're kind of like still with that battle.
How do you think men have changed? Because you're in your late 40s.
I'm 48. Yeah, I'm 48.
48. Yeah. You've seen the old school of man who was very masculine and dominant.
Yes.
But the new breed seems to be less so.
Yeah, I mean, yes. At least men my age, they have a hard time. I mean, just my experience, my friends and people that I know, I've seen that men usually have a hard time with like this reemergent sexuality power in women. So they're either intimidated or they get even, stauncher and heavier and more, stuck in their old ways. And, so I see it affected them. But then with the younger men, they're a little bit more free-flowing, much more like the women. Everything's a little bit more fluid. There's more communication. I mean, obviously information is more readily available, right? You can click on thousands of articles to help you figure things out. Whereas, when I was growing up, there was none of that.
Yeah, but given that you are basically a dom,
yes,
that more feminine view that younger men have, you're not tapping into that. You're basically delivering the old school.
Right, the old school, but with respect to the dynamic, because I think that's one thing that most doms that I've spoken to kind of like don't get, because ultimately the submissive is in control, right? Because then why do safe words exist, right? Then if the submissive is not ultimately in control, then safe words would not be a thing, right? As soon as they say it, you have to stop.
That's one of the things I've learned from all these talks with dominatrixes and subs and all that, is the sub is usually the one who's truly in control.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, no dom or dominatrix is going and kidnapping people from the street and tying them up and doing things to them. It's usually, and then when it becomes a transactional monetary type situation, it's totally them being in control. So it's a little bit of a visceral like role play, right? Like that's why to me it was very important to have a little bit of a connection beforehand, get the ground rules going, and then be like, okay, action, right? And then you can go into it, and that trust is built rather quickly in that conversation, and then you advance. And then if it's a client that wants multiple sessions, not just one meeting, then it can get like a lot more fun and a lot more, you can get deeper into it.
What differences do you see in men and women?
As far as?
I mean, just like how they function, how they operate.
Yeah, women are just way more intellectual, they're more complicated.
Men are basic.
Yes, men are very basic. And again, if you take a look at it on a species level, that makes sense, right? Because women are the caretakers of the species, right? You wouldn't want the caretaker of the species to be the simple gender, right? The species wouldn't last that long, right? But men are more utilitarian, right? Which, I'm very comfortable with. I've come to realize that that's just the way things are. And instead of going against the grain, just embrace who you are. And when you embrace who you are, you also embrace the complexity of the female, of the woman.
It's actually a pretty interesting dynamic that is going on between men and women.
Yes.
Even though it's changing, it
is changing, but it's still rooted in that.
I think it's
awesome.
It's primitive, yeah.
Yeah, it is very primitive, and that's like kind of like, it's primitive, and then, we're the most intellectual beings on the planet, right? And if you take a look at it like that, we're basically the only species on the planet that actually attacks the bears of the species. We don't take care of women's health. We subjugate them. We make them less than. We're the only species on the planet that does that. And you would think the most intellectual species would not do that, right? But yet here we are, right? And it's kind of sad. So I kind of like rally against that just internally. I mean, I have a daughter. I was raised by my mom, primarily housewife, and my grandmother, my aunt. So I always saw that women were very powerful. Like they were in charge, like throughout my life. My father was in charge of just, providing, right? But the real education of life came from my mother. So that was just something that was inbred in me. So, but it is interesting that even though, things have changed a little bit, they're still rooted in that.
Yeah, I think women are the ones who are truly in power.
Oh, absolutely. And they should be. Absolutely, because again, they control the species. And I don't know, once I started looking at it that way, it became very easy to, decipher certain situations, certain dynamics, relationships, whether they were romantic or just friendships with women. It just became very easy to manage.
It'd be nice if more women understood that.
Yes, and it would be even nicer if more men understood that too. I mean, again, it's a partnership, right? It's the yin and the yang. One complements the other, but there has to be almost an agreement to see it that way, So, and again, I think with the whole doming dynamic and profession that I'm in, that meeting of the minds is quite easy, because both parties are very willing to be open, at least to just tap into that, primal situation without giving up anything, right? Without giving up, your status in the workforce or...
Once you step out of the room, it doesn't really...
Yeah, once you step out of the room, it's like, hey, okay, see you next time, hopefully, or maybe not. Or thank you for a great time. Usually it's shown by tips.
Do you have any regrets in your life?
I used to, and then, I don't know. I'm kind of one of those people that think you don't really learn from the great moments, you learn from the bad moments, right? So then, again, like I told you before, I love to learn, so why would I regret something that helped me learn? So when I was younger, when we're all younger, we're all just dumber because we lack perspective and less time on the planet, we don't know anything. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, there's no real regrets. I wish I would have done some things differently, perhaps, but not really. I've never violated anyone's freedoms or anything like that, so no, I really don't live with regret.
You've been in love before?
Oh yeah. I'm Latin. I love to fall in love, man. It is. It's one of the we're talking about being primal. It's one of the, again, because we're the most intellectual, creatures on the planet. It's great to be in love. Yeah. I've fallen in love, out of love, had my heart broken. It's almost, tapping into that true essence of being a human being and working with our intellect and sharing moments with somebody. Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like the most painful moments are the most memorable and the most transformative.
Yes, exactly. That's what I just, do I regret, falling in love at 18 with a, 30-year-old? No, because I learned so much, at so young. So why would I regret that at all? And I've had many great love affairs. I mean, I'm in the middle of a great love affair now. And I never think about it ending or how long is this going to last. No, I'm just very present in the moment, just live it.
That's
right
a great
now.
way to be.
Yeah. I mean, there's really no other plane of existence but the present, right? The future doesn't really exist and the past absolutely doesn't exist. So, why focus on anything else but what's going on right now?
What does your current partner think of your career?
She's into it. She likes it. When we first started dating, there was some of that dynamic with us. And then as our relationship evolved, it became less and less. But she knew that I like to exercise that domination muscle. So, we've done it not professionally, but like in my personal life, like, we'll meet women that, want to get dominated and she'll watch, and she'll join because she knows that that's a need that I, sometimes have. It's not, so she's completely fine with it.
Communication is the key.
Yes, absolutely.
I've learned also with these fetish.
Yeah. I mean,
lifestyles.
Yeah, absolutely. Communicating is just the key in everything, right? And again, like I'm always going to go back to saying it, like we're so intelligent, and sometimes we betray ourselves and not lean on that, right? We can talk about anything, and as long as you find the right person, the right partner, the right friend, everything should be on the table. And it's just words and thoughts. Is not why negate ourselves that faculty.
And usually the thing that you're most afraid of talking about is probably the most important thing to talk about.
Yes, exactly. That's extremely true. And, why shy away from it? Again, you have to find the right partner. You have to be in the right time of your life.
Well, you'll find out very soon that it's not the right partner if you.
Yes. Yeah. But unfortunately, some people don't.
Yeah. I know.
And then they're in like these loveless relationships or these relationships that just aren't working, but because it's the way it's supposed to be, they stay in them. And
that's why the divorce rate is so good.
Yeah, that seems like torture to me. Yes.
What's been the roughest thing you've gone through in your life?
Probably, the death of my brother. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he passed away a couple of years ago from an overdose. So that was pretty rough.
That's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, like basically my genetic twin. Right, so it's like there was no other person on the planet like him. It was just like us, and so yeah, that was pretty rough. But I've come to terms that hey, he lived his life the way he wanted to live it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a prolonged existence on the planet. But now I help take care of his son. He's really is a young man now, but. Yeah, so that's been the toughest.
He got involved in substances that you did not?
Yes, and he just had a pretty addictive personality. I was the firstborn, so I got all the attention as a child, right? I was like the golden child, the most intelligent, I wouldn't say star athlete, but I was like the athlete, and so I got a lot of the first go at it, right? I got my parents' best try at it. Definitely my father's very limited man. And my brother just got like the shortcomings of everything, and that kind of like, that shapes how you who you are.
How you develop.
Yeah, how you develop, and and me and him had a very rough relationship because of that reason, right? He was like, almost don't want to say it, but he was like, just jealous. And because, my father pitted us against each other without even knowing that he was doing it. So he had a very different like upbringing, even though we literally lived in the same household at the same time next to each other.
It's interesting how sibling rivalries are almost like an exaggerated version of the rivalries we see in life.
Just absolutely. It's our first. He was like, unknowing to both of us, he was like my first rival, right? Or my first potential enemy, or my first potential best friend, right? And sometimes it's all of it together at the same time. So, yeah, but because of that search for love and acceptance, you know, I guess that kind of breeded that addictive personality. And then, you know, once you go down that road, you know, it's unfortunate. And you know, we all have the capacity to stop, turn back, get ourselves better, you know, get ourselves fixed, you know, with therapy and all that stuff. So, which he refused to do. So, you know, so that would definitely have been the toughest thing.
Do you find getting older as a man is easier or better?
I mean,
romantically, maybe I'm thinking.
I mean, it's definitely easier because of how society has set things up, right? You see him, you just turn on the news at night and see that there's a guy that's basically falling apart, right? But he's still on camera. And then they show the woman, and as soon as they get aged, they get sent out to, you know, do the field work, right? So it is easier for a man in society, but I'm starting to find like my physical limitations as far as playing sports, that's something that, you know, it's a little bit hard to get used to. You know, I can't run as fast. I get injured a little bit more, you know, easier. And I get up in the morning and I have pains in my in my knees, and I'm like, I haven't done anything. You know, so it's getting older is tougher, you know, but yeah, again, like with everything else, just embrace it. And
in a lot of ways, it's easier though too.
Yes, absolutely.
Giovanni, what would you say is your the most important lesson that you've learned in your life?
And this is a lesson that I've learned within the last like year or so. And I guess that makes sense just because of, again, perspective, more time on the planet, is make sure that you have exuberance for being alive. You know, be joyful in everything you do, right? So many people don't have the pleasure of waking up every day, right? Even if you have, even though you know you're gonna have a bad day, or you're gonna be doing something that you don't want to do, whatever it is, you can still do it with joy, right? So I've learned to just be as joyful as possible, because it's over. It's gonna be over just like that. You know, we're pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things. So just be as happy as possible in the moment. So I've learned to like just have that exuberance, you know, happening at all times. Not easy. It's again, it's like a skill that you have to work at. But so I caretake for my mom, and she has dementia. So because of her brain, you know, ailment, she's almost forced to be in the moment, right? Because again, like we were saying, the past doesn't really matter to her. Her brain can't really function to worry about the future. So she's like right here. And that took a while for me to get used to, but now I'm like, yeah, I don't have to wait to get dementia to like be right here all the time. So that's what I've learned, to just be as happy and as joyful and have that exuberance inside of me. And I think then it won't matter if I'm 50, 60, 70, you know, as long as I have that frame of mind. Yeah, and the other thing that I've learned is that, or that I've started to see, is that attracts other people.
Oh, for sure.
To me, like they almost feel that, and they're like, oh, they want a piece of that, you know, and I'm very willing to share it, or, you know, explain my philosophies.
Giovanni, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
All right.